It's Halloween on Disney+. Watch frightful family favorites like Hocus Pocus and Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas on Disney+.
I am the Pumpkin King!
Then take the terror to 10 with a thrilling new remake of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Scream, and more with Halloween on Disney+. All these and more screaming this Halloween season with Hulu on Disney+. Bundle subscription required. 18+. Select Hulu content via Disney+. Additional content on Hulu app. Terms apply. Visit disneyplus.com/Hulu for details.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Roger, that's a rough guess right now, over.
Welcome to True Spies, Brief Histories. In these bonus minisodes, we'll draw on the knowledge of our True Spies experts to enhance your understanding of the forces, events, and personalities that shape the modern world. We're living through an era in which the impact of spies, subterfuge, and covert influence is increasingly visible. We're bombarded with headlines about foreign interference, wartime propaganda, and threats from cyberspace. And that's just for starters. But how did we get here? I'm Joe Foley, series producer for True Spies. This is a brief history of information warfare. Look, if you follow the news, you'll have noticed more and more noise about information and how it can be deployed to benefit one group or another. 3 words in particular spring to mind. The first is disinformation. That's false information which is specifically designed to mislead. That makes it distinct from the second, misinformation, which isn't deliberate. So, let's say a photo of a politician is incorrectly captioned on a news website, giving a misleading impression of who that person is, where they are, or when the picture was taken. You then share that photograph, expressing your disbelief at what you're seeing. Intentionally or not, you've reframed the narrative based on bad intel. That's misinformation. Now let's say you doctor that same photograph to give the impression that the unfortunate politician is outraging public decency on consecrated ground. That's disinformation. Sometimes it's hard to know if a piece of false information is of the mis or dis variety, accidental or deliberate. That's because across the centuries, state actors and individuals alike have used increasingly sophisticated means of deploying information to suit their aims. Which brings us to our third word, propaganda. That's basically an umbrella term that includes convenient truths, outright lies, and a blend of the two. Propaganda aims to influence opinion in order to achieve a political goal. It's around us all the time, but it's most obvious during times of war. And it goes back a very long way. Between 32 and 30 BCE, a civil war was fought in the Roman Republic. After Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, the Republic had been governed by a triumvirate, a 3-way power share between Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus. They were all powerful generals with big ambitions, and those ambitions inevitably tore them apart. Marcus Lepidus was the first to go, stripped of power and exiled in 36 BCE. Octavian, the adopted son and heir of Julius Caesar, knew that a war with Mark Antony was inevitable. To win it and then hold on to power, he would need the Roman public on side. Luckily for him, Mark Antony had made himself vulnerable. His long and very public affair with the Egyptian queen, Cleopatra, was something clever old Octavian could use. He insinuated, through poems and other means, that Mark Antony's devotion to his foreign lover made him un-Roman. Given that Antony was actually married to Octavian's sister, a good Roman wife, it was easy enough to drum up sympathy. Octavian also illegally seized and then publicised what we'd call classified information. In this case, it was Mark Antony's secret will, which contained incriminating plans to give land to his illegitimate half-Egyptian children. Things eventually came to a head with the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, in which Octavian's forces crushed Antony's. He celebrated the victory with more propaganda, in the form of commemorative coins depicting his triumph. This helped to solidify his reputation as a strong, and most importantly, quintessentially Roman ruler, which must have come in handy as he established absolute power, becoming the first emperor of the Roman Empire in 27 BCE. The Emperor Augustus, as Octavian came to be known, would rule until his death 41 years later. A monumental win for a great strategist, on and off the battlefield. Now, if you're already familiar with that story, it might be something to do with Shakespeare's famous tragedy, Antony and Cleopatra. Some scholars believe that Shakespeare himself might have played propagandist for the Tudor dynasty, who ruled England during his lifetime. The example that comes to mind is the tragedy of Richard III, a play about the downfall of the last Plantagenet king of England, who was ousted by Henry Tudor in 1485. Writing more than a century later, during the reign of Elizabeth I, Shakespeare depicts Richard as a despicable child murderer who plotted his way to the throne. Now, whether that's true or not, and medieval rulers generally didn't shy away from the nasty stuff, it's the particulars of Shakespeare's Richard that raise eyebrows among some modern historians. He's written as a sneering hunchback, half mad with resentment over his ill-made form. Disability and disfigurement are often used as visual shorthands for evil in works of fiction. You'll recognise that outdated attitude in more than a few James Bond films, and the same goes for propaganda. When Richard's remains were finally discovered under a car park in the English town of Leicester in 2012, his skeleton did show signs of scoliosis, a curvature of the spine. But this doesn't confirm Shakespeare's unflattering portrayal, not by a long way. Contemporary sources describe Richard as having one shoulder slightly higher than the other, which a modern assessment of his spine seems to support. A custom-made suit of armour, which he most certainly had, could have evened out most of the visual effect. So why did Shakespeare play it up? Well, his work would have had to get past the Queen's censors if he wanted to stage his plays. The Tudor royals would have had a vested interest in making the old, defeated Plantagenet dynasty look as bad as possible. After all, who could complain about the Tudors when the alternative had been so monstrous? A little over a century before Shakespeare's birth, the invention of the printing press had revolutionised the dark art of messaging. Political thinkers, movers and shakers could now reach huge audiences relatively cheaply. Books, pamphlets and eventually newspapers flooded the world with mis- and disinformation. Naturally, nation-states caught on quickly. In the 19th century, both sides of what would erupt into the American Civil War churned out almanacs, cartoons and articles which sold the public their respective ideologies. For example, anti-abolitionists in the North and the South used pseudo-scientific disinformation about the so-called science of race to argue for slavery. By the early 20th century, the dissemination of paper propaganda had become an essential and integrated part of any government's war effort.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
During the Great War, or World War I, fought between 1914 and 1918, Britain and Germany both moved to formalise their propaganda machinery. In Britain, newspaper men were at the forefront of the wartime disinformation campaign. One was Lord Alfred Northcliffe, a media baron who, by 1914, controlled almost half of Britain's newspaper circulation. He flooded his publications with dehumanising, anti-German propaganda. In 1917, when America entered the war, he was put in charge of countering the powerful anti-war lobby in the USA. In an essay for the families of American troops called What to Send Your Soldier, Northcliffe wrote, "At the front, health is so good. The open-air life, the regular and plenteous feeding, the exercise, and the freedom from care and responsibility keep the soldiers extraordinarily fit and contented. Now that we're all aware of the unimaginable horrors of the Western Front, Northcliffe's propaganda efforts seem almost laughable. But as British PM David Lloyd George remarked to another leading newspaper editor in 1917, if the people really knew, the war would be stopped tomorrow. But of course they don't know, and can't know. By and large, Northcliffe and his colleagues had the floor. British reporters had to be accredited by the government before they could travel to the front. Much like Shakespeare, they were expected to toe the line, underreporting Allied losses and amplifying their victories. Towards the end of the war, Lord Northcliffe refocused on propaganda aimed at the enemy. Working out of Crewe House in London, his department used information gleaned from German POWs to create propaganda leaflets aimed at demoralising the enemy. Then they'd be dropped from airplanes over enemy lines. There's a lot of debate about how effective this actually was. A few years in the trenches would be enough to make anyone cynical after all. Nonetheless, by the time the Second World War came around, Northcliffe's operation was remembered pretty fondly.
There's a myth that develops around Crewe House in the interwar years because Germany implodes at the end of the First World War into societal, falls apart and revolution. Because of that, there's this myth around Crewe House that it actually plays a very decisive role in defeating the Kaiserreich. Because of the damage it does to German morale.
Here's a sneak peek of one of our subscriber debriefs with Professor James Crossland. In this conversation, and in the True Spies episode, Britain's Agent, James uncovered the extraordinary life of a diplomat and intelligence operative called Robert Bruce Lockhart. After an assignment in 1920s Russia ended badly, Lockhart was down, but not out.
So he officially leaves the Foreign Office in the 1920s, but he never properly leaves. He's always still meeting with people who are connected, people in the intelligence services, people in government. And that line between the intelligence services, government, the press, it's quite fluid to begin with.
As storm clouds began to gather over Europe once again, Lockhart was keenly aware that propaganda would play a big part in any future conflict.
His view is that a war with Germany is damn near inevitable, and that Britain is woefully unprepared for it. And the thing that increasingly starts to bother him is the fact that because he understands that Nazi Germany and indeed the Soviet Union are regimes that have been very much built on propaganda and on the control of narratives and the alteration of fact, he's looking at Britain and saying, well, we have none of this. We have no propaganda. We have no strong narratives for our people. We're just kind of listlessly marching towards the abyss. By the time we're getting towards the Second World War, there is this idea that we need something like Crewe House to be developed. And Lockhart is involved in that because of, again, these connections he's made during the interwar period, people who are thinking about propaganda in earnest. And he is flagged as someone who is a wordsmith, who is concerned about things, who knows about things, who has access to intelligence. He seems like an ideal propagandist.
At the beginning of the war, Lockhart was part of a propaganda group named after their secretive hideaway in the English countryside, Woburn Abbey.
Collectively known as Woburn.
But the propaganda Woburn produced wasn't especially good.
The first actual air raid of the Second World War by the RAF is carried out. It drops propaganda leaflets, not bombs. And those propaganda leaflets are terrible. They have a speech of Neville Chamberlain's basically saying, Hitler's a bad guy, translated into German. And that's followed up with a sort of rumor campaign that's spread by British intelligence assets in Germany saying, oh, hey, German people, Hitler's mad, right? He's only going to lead to bad things. Maybe you should stop supporting him. And that's the level of sophistication there.
It's only later in the war, with the formation of the Political Warfare Executive, that Britain's propaganda machine finds its rhythm.
One thing that PWE really invests in is radio, and this was something that Crewe House did not have in the First World War. But the idea of being able to develop what are essentially fake news radio stations that can broadcast into the Reich and the occupied territories.
The PWE became adept at blending three types of propaganda.
One is white propaganda, which is truths that fit your narrative. So the German army is having setbacks on the Eastern Front, which it was in 1942. And then there's black propaganda, which is flat out lie. the German army is having setbacks on the Eastern Front because all the generals are drunk. But if you combine elements of those two, then you get the sweet spot propaganda, which is grey propaganda. You know, the old idea of the best lie is hidden between truths.
Like Northcliffe and Crewe House 2 decades earlier, the PWE excelled at using prisoner interrogations to create narratives.
They are using intelligence gathered from various sources, including interrogated German prisoners, to craft really quite compelling stories that blend fact and fiction and are transmitted to predominantly a German audience in the guise of being legitimate radio stations within Germany that are speaking truth to power.
Radio was a great leap forward for the art of propaganda and the spread of mis- and disinformation. The rise of the internet has been even more revolutionary. But some of the same techniques apply.
It all started with an investigation from the task force of the European Commission, which is fighting disinformation. And they discovered a website which was impersonating the European Parliament.
This is Roman Adamczyk. He works for an anti-disinformation NGO called EU Disinfo Lab. Roman spoke to us for the 51st episode of True Spies, Indian Actors.
And what was interesting is that this website was copy-pasting a lot of content from Russia Today.
The European Commission naturally assumed that Russia was behind the fake website, but they were wrong.
And what we realized is that this report had much more nuances. And we were really interested by some specific details. For example, why this fake media outlet impersonating the European Union will have a Facebook page managed from India. And we also had a look at the original content, because behind all the articles copy-pasted from Russia Today, there was some original content. And it was mostly op-eds written by members of the European Parliament. And these op-eds were really focusing on India and Pakistan.
Roman and his colleagues figured out that the Russia Today reposts were a red herring. The few original articles on the site were anti-Pakistan op-eds.
The copy-pasting was really more a question of having free content to display on your website than really an ideological proximity.
They connected the site to more than 250 others like it, run by a shadowy Indian company. All of them blended copy-pasted filler articles with anti-Pakistan invective. To give the sites legitimacy, they used the names of long-defunct Western newspapers, like a spy novel protagonist choosing his alias from a gravestone.
Some of these media were active like in the 20s or 30s. So there are really, most of these media haven't had any domain names or any website. That's the thing.
Just like Bruce Lockhart's phony radio stations, these websites disguised their true origin. In doing so, they deprived their readership of a straightforward read on their political bias. And if the owners of online news sites are hard to trace, the allegiances of individual internet users are even harder to suss out. In 2024, journalist Peter Pomerantsev spoke to us about the notorious Internet Research Agency, which operated out of St. Petersburg until 2023. Its employees flooded online spaces with pro-Kremlin propaganda.
You need lots of things to keep people distracted, scared, entertained. You need to crawl into different audiences and treat different audiences with different messages. They manipulate discourse online through various tools, through online publications, through various laws, through troll farms. So it's a much richer approach to controlling society through information and disinformation.
The Internet Research Agency was, at least on paper, owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin. He was the founder of the Wagner Group, a private army with strong links to the Kremlin. So technically, the Russian state had plausible deniability. During Vladimir Putin's annexation of Crimea in 2014, Peter told us that the troll farm helped to shore up the Kremlin's support there by spreading stories about far-right Ukrainian plots against ethnic Russian civilians. Then, when a controversial referendum was called, a majority of Crimean voters apparently supported becoming part of Russia.
And then you had all these websites popping up saying, this is the Russian Spring, and this is a genuine people-powered movement, and it's got nothing to do with Russia at all. Nothing to do with Russia. This is very local, obviously being run from the troll farm in St. Petersburg. and very few genuine protests. You maybe have a few organized protests, which are then filmed, used for pictures, and put on social media.
Even without state resources, online disinformation and propaganda is frighteningly easy to get away with.
There is no law in most countries banning disinformation. Tech companies now talk about wanting to curb something they call coordinated inauthentic behavior. The illegal bit might be interference in an election in an illegal way, but simply sitting around and producing tens of thousands of fake accounts on Twitter or Facebook, that's not a bookable offense. The various attempts to regulate the space are highly complex.
Now, with the advent of AI, we can't even assume that the person running that social media account is a person at all. Large language models like ChatGPT are getting smarter and smarter. It's now pretty easy to use one to create a convincing bot. Oh, and there's more good news. Year on year, the share of internet traffic generated by bots is growing. So, whether you're on the web, reading the paper, or tuning into your favourite news programming, you'd be wise to take nothing for granted.
Life's full of big money decisions. Dividend versus growth stocks, tapping home equity, even navigating tariffs.
And for every smart tip out there, there's another one that sounds smart but isn't.
That's where NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast comes in. I'm Sean Piles, a certified financial planner professional.
And I'm Elizabeth Ayola. On NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast, our finance journalists do the homework so you can make confident wealth-building moves.
Whether you're building your portfolio or protecting it, we've got the facts and a little fun along the way.
Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Hey folks, get ready for a new season of Blowback coming Monday, September 22nd. This time around, we're covering the Cold War showdown in Africa.
When apartheid South Africa invades the newly independent nation of Angola, revolutionary Cuba sends its own army to defend its African ally, while the United States backs a warlord whose only goal is power.
Subscribe now at blowback.show and get the entire season when it drops, ad-free. Blowback.show.
Why are they telling you what they're telling you? Who does the message benefit? And how much can you verify? Naturally, that applies to this podcast too. We hope that you've enjoyed this short spin through the history of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. The stories you've heard today and hundreds more can be found by searching for True Spies wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, including early releases and bonus episodes, be sure to subscribe to SPYSCAPE Plus at plus.spyscape.com. Thanks for listening.